Ever feel like you're constantly bombarded with articles about AI, the metaverse, cryptocurrency, and you're like, what does it even mean?
It can feel like everyone's talking about the future of technology, right?
Right, and half the time I don't even know if it's good news or bad news.
Exactly.
So today we're doing a deep dive into this whole data-driven society thing, trying to figure out if all this tech is leading us to utopia or, well, not.
And to help us unpack it all, we're digging into this really interesting university lecture on data in communication and society. You know the one from,
Oh, yeah, yeah, right. Professor, what's her name?
right, her. It's dense, but
Hmm.
it's got some real gems in there. And it jumps right into this big question about,
What's the question?
it asks what kind of reality we're even building with all this data flying around. Like, are we constructing the skyscraper as we're putting in the windows?
Ooh, I like that analogy. It does feel like we're kind of making things up as we go along, doesn't it?
Totally. And that's where this idea of, are we in control or is the data in control comes into play.
Right, because the lecture talks about all those apisms, right?
Yeah, the Edisms. Techno-optimism versus techno-pessimism, all that jazz.
It's like, pick a side. Are we all going to be living in a digital utopia or hiding from robots?
It's the classic debate, really. You've got one group saying technology will solve climate change, cure diseases, and usher in a new era of peace and prosperity.
And then the other side's all, the robots are coming. We're one algorithm away from a Black Mirror episode.
Exactly. But like the lecture points out, it's rarely that black and white. It's way more nuanced than that.
And, speaking of extremes, remember the whole .com bubble bursting back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
The lecture uses that as a prime example of, like, techno-optimism gone wild.
It's like everyone was so hyped about the internet,
Yeah.
which, don't get me wrong, is amazing, but they kind of forgot that not every website is going to turn into Google.
And boom, suddenly everyone's stock portfolios are in the toilet.
Right. It's a good reminder that technology doesn't always equal instant riches or a perfect world.
Okay, so then on the other side of the spectrum, we've got people like Sherry Turkle, right? The whole alone together thing.
Oh, yeah, Turkle.
Yeah.
She's a big name in this field. And I think that alone together idea really resonates with people, especially now.
Because it's true. Like, we're more connected than ever with our devices, but are we really connecting with each other? Or are we just more isolated and lonely?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what techno-criticism is all about, not just dismissing technology, but really examining its impact on our lives and our relationships and our well-being.
It's like, are we sacrificing genuine human connection for the convenience of, like, texting someone in the next room?
Exactly.
So where does this leave us? Are we all doomed? Should we all just move to a cabin in the woods and ditch our smartphones?
I don't think so. The lecture actually argues for like a more balanced view. It encourages us to be more pragmatic about technology.
Okay, I like that. Pragmatic.
It says we should acknowledge both the incredible potential and the very real risks that come with all this new tech.
And I guess find ways to, like, steer it in the right direction.
Yeah, to use technology thoughtfully and
Yeah.
intentionally to shape a better future one where it empowers us instead of dividing us or, making us even more addicted to our screens.
So the next time you see some crazy headline about how AI is going to take over the world or, transport us to Mars.
Or make us all independently wealthy.
Right, exactly. It's good to remember those CSISms. It's not about being pro-technology or anti-technology.
It's about being,
Informed.
yes, informed. It's about being critical thinkers.
Don't just take the headlines at face value.
Do your own digging.
Exactly. Ask questions and,
Form your own opinion.
yes, because this whole data society thing, it's not some far-off future, right?
It's happening now.
It's happening right now, and we're all part of it, whether we like it or not. So true.
So the question I have for you, dear listener, is this. What kind of data society do you want to help create? Just something to think about.
Technology is going to save us all, and uh-oh, what have we unleashed? It's everywhere.
Totally. And the more we look at this, it feels like we're stuck between these two extremes. Either tech is the ultimate solution, or it's a one-way ticket to disaster.
It's a classic debate, and honestly, you really can't get a good handle on any of this tech stuff unless you understand both sides of the argument.
Right. Okay, so let's start with a big old dose of the good stuff, techno-optimism. Remember back when the internet was brand new, it was like this whole era of anything is possible. Nicholas Negroponte, he was right there at the forefront of it all. He was saying back in the 90s that digital would be the key. access, freedom, the power to actually change things for the better. It was exciting.
Yeah, you could really feel the energy back then.
Yeah.
And the energy, that hope, it led to some seriously amazing things. But, and this is a big but, the real world has a way of kind of throwing cold water on even the biggest, most exciting ideas.
Oh, tell me about it. I mean, the dot-com bubble, everyone was going crazy for anything remotely internet-related, and then bam, everything came crashing down.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the digital divide, you know. Even today, there are tons of people who can't get online, can't access all the things that others take for granted. It really shows that all this tech progress, it doesn't always reach everyone equally.
So true. Okay, but then we have the other side, the techno-pessimists.
Yeah.
They're the ones who see all this, and they're like, hold on a minute, are we sure this is all a good idea? Like Andrew Keen, he argues that the internet is turning us all into amateurs. We're losing sight of real expertise.
He's got a point, you know? This whole digital age has really shaken up how we think about knowledge and who the experts really are.
Totally. And then there's Sherry Turkle. She talks about how all these devices we love, they can sometimes, like, get in the way of actually connecting with each other, you know, face to face. It's like we're together, but we're not really there.
It's one of the big paradoxes. More ways to connect than ever, but some people are feeling more alone than ever. In both sides of this whole debate, they often fall into this trap of technological determinism. Like technology is this big, scary force that controls everything. But it's way more complicated than that.
Right. It's easy to think that technology is like this outside force that shapes our lives, but it's not really like that. It's more like technology reflects us, our choices, what we value, all the messy stuff that makes us human.
Totally. I mean, look at Evgeny Morozov. He talks about how technology can give power to some people while taking it away from others all at the same time. It's not as simple as tech is good or tech is bad.
It's like trying to figure something out, and the answer keeps changing right in front of you. We see all the cool stuff technology can do, but then there's always something else, you know, like a catch or something hidden underneath.
And that's exactly why we got to look past those simple either-or arguments, you know? Good versus bad, utopia versus dystopia, all that. It's way more interesting and important to engage with technology without just blindly buying the hype or assuming the worst.
Like being a techno-critic, right? It's not about being anti-technology. It's about asking the hard questions and realizing that progress isn't always a straight line upwards.
Exactly. We have to look beyond what's right there on the surface. Got to think about what might be hidden, even when something seems amazing on the surface, like atomization, for example. I mean, it sounds weird, right? But some people say that even though we're more connected than ever, we're actually becoming more isolated as individuals.
It's like when you're surrounded by people, but you still feel totally alone. I've definitely felt that. And what about that feeling of being totally bombarded by information? Every single day. It's way too much.
Oh, yeah. Information overload is definitely a sign of the times, right? How are we supposed to filter through all of it and figure out what's actually true and important?
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Rare.
And on top of all that, there's the commercial side of things. I mean, the internet's basically one giant shopping mall, and they're using our personal data as currency.
That's a really good point. Techno-criticism makes us ask these questions, like, who is really benefiting from all this technology? Is it helping people, or is it just making a few companies even more powerful?
Yeah, all those tech giants that seem to know everything about us.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, you know, are we giving up our privacy without even realizing it, just for a little bit of convenience?
It feels like a constant trade-off and not always a fair one.
These are the important questions we need to be asking, even if they make us a little uncomfortable. We have to figure out how to use technology to our advantage without letting it take advantage of us.
So how do we do that? How do we find that balance between being excited about innovation and being cautious at the same time?
Well, Robert McChesney talks about finding a pragmatic middle ground, which I think is a really useful way to think about it. He's saying we can be excited about the potential of the internet without ignoring the very real problems that come with it.
Like technology is a tool, right? And any tool can be used for good or for bad.
Exactly. It all comes down to how we choose to use it. So instead of freaking out and saying everything is amazing or everything is terrible, we need to be more thoughtful and nuanced in how we approach technology in our lives.
It's like we're not just along for the ride, right? We actually get to decide where this whole data-driven thing goes.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really important question for you listening right now, you know. How do we actually deal with all this?
Because it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed, right? All this talk about utopias and dystopias and everything in between. But you know what really stood out to me? It's this idea of empowerment.
Absolutely. All these readings, they all agree on one thing.
Yeah.
Technology might be powerful, but it doesn't control everything. We still have a choice in how this all plays out.
Like, we have agency. We can actually make decisions that shape how technology impacts us, our communities, everything.
I'm totally with you there. It's about taking control, right? Not just accepting whatever new gadget or algorithm comes along, but really asking ourselves, what kind of digital world do we want to live in?
Right. One that values privacy over being watched all the time. Real connections instead of everyone feeling isolated. Where we actually think for ourselves instead of just blindly believing everything we see online. Those are the big questions, don't you think?
They really are. And those answers, they won't come from some crystal ball that tells us the future. They come from the decisions we all make every single day. As individuals, consumers, just people living in this digital world.
So it's not enough to just know how the technology works, right? We have to figure out what's important to us, what we value, and how those values play into this whole digital thing.
That's what it all comes down to. Because if we can agree that we actually have a say in shaping this data-driven future, what kind of future will we create?
That's the question we'll leave you with today, folks. Because in the end, the future of technology, it's not set in stone. It's a story that's still being written, and we're all writing it together.